straight across to somebody who would be able to put all this into perspective. Saugata Bhattacharya is joining us right now. He's Chief Economist with Axis Bank. We also have Dipan Mehta join in. He's member BSc NSE, a market veteran really. Gentlemen, good evening. Thanks very much for joining us on the show. Saugata, Prashant here. First up, I mean, just put the big numbers into perspective for us. It seems the allowances part are going to come later. The government is going to effect an increase there later. Right now, it's essentially the salary, the basic pay, which has been increased. Go on, Saugata.
That's right. So, I mean, the basic pay, as your colleague put it so well, the basic pay. So, if you take the allowances part, the total central government budget plus the railways should be about, I would think about 0.07% of GDP. So this definitely has an impact on consumption. Remember, though, that this is not new money being created. I mean, this is essentially a shift probably from capital expenditures or from a wider array of consumers into the hands of a select category of potential consumers. So here the marginal propensity of consumption would come into play, and as you yourself put it very nicely, that I mean a whole bunch of consumables, discretionary incomes increases, and together with that consumer durables, household appliances, electronic goods, automobiles, these are presumably the sectors that immediately might see an increase in demand. Real estate also, probably to a certain extent. This is not going to be as dramatic as we had seen in 2008-9, because over there first the scale of salary, wages, salary, pension increases is more limited this time than what we had seen in 2008-9, and as well as the arrears component. I mean, the number that we heard about 20,000 odd is minuscule compared to the arrears that were given spread across 2 years in 2008-9 and 9-10. So the impact is likely to be limited. The inflationary role is not likely to be very high, significantly high. So on the whole, I think this is a net benefit in terms of using some of the excess capacities that we have in the system, given a boost. Together, if the rains are good, the two together should actually start a little bit of increase in demand in the system.
The big number that we were all talking about, Saugata, you and I have discussed this many times in the past over the last 1 year, the 1 lakh crore odd boost, right? That remains. It's only that from the general budget and the railway budget, you know, the numbers are missing at this point, but they will come into effect at some point in the future. The overall impetus remains the same.
That's right. I mean, you're completely right. That I mean, that 1 lakh, or at least, I mean, we don't know how the allowances part will play out into the system, but assume they will also come in at some point in time. They will also come in. So let's start working with that 1 lakh crore number. So that 1 lakh crore. I mean, if you assume a marginal propensity to consume, I mean, we economists talk about this. So say as you consume about 60% of that, a little bit more probably. So that's probably something like 60,000 crores, 65,000 crores that will come into play. If not immediately, then very, very soon. But remember, before you go into that, so some part of this 1 lakh crore, probably around, say, on a rough rule of thumb, about 20%, will come back to the government immediately in the form of taxes, income taxes, and some parts more staggered across in terms of consumption taxes, indirect taxes on consumption of goods and services. So it will not be that full 1 lakh crore that will come into play in consumption, say about 70% or of that, and then 65% of that 70%. So roughly about 45, 50, 40,000 will come into as additional consumption in the system.
Okay, let's talk to a consumer company. Kevin Dusa is President Finance with Bajaj Auto. Saugata, stay with us. Dipan, I'm coming to you as well. Kevin, thanks very much for joining us. Good evening. Prashant here. How do you see this? What kind of an impact can this have, the pay hikes for government employees?
I think it's extremely positive for the industry, for the two-wheelers as well as for the four-wheelers. Unlike the past where we had a huge growth for the two-wheelers, I think this benefit will go more to the four-wheelers, keeping in mind the fact that penetration is already high, relatively high for the two-wheelers. But yes, it's going to be extremely positive, as you correctly mentioned, for the FMCG goods, for consumer durables, and for the auto sector. More importantly, what I see is with the disbursements likely to happen more in about August, September, this time the festive season is going to be a bumper season for all.
In a way, the overall impact, Kevin, is also, if you were listening into our earlier conversation, is going to be staggered. It's not coming in full force, in full force from the 1st of July. As part of August salaries. The allowances bit, for example, is going to come later because I guess the government wants to stagger the fiscal impact a little bit. So it's going to be slow,
right.
the seep through.
That's right. But they've also mentioned about the areas that are going to come in a staggered manner. And therefore, I was saying sometime in September, October, that's when the festive season starts. And there will be some increase in the net take-home pay of the employees, which will go into these consumables. You
said four-wheelers should benefit more. That's purely a function of penetration of two-wheelers being higher?
I would believe so, because if you see today, a person who's getting about a salary of about 25,000 a month would by and large have a two-wheeler. So what I see happening is people going and upgrading their existing vehicles in the two-wheeler segment, automatically, of course, expanding the segment. But the penetration in four-wheelers and the aspiration of a lot of government employees would definitely be going to buy a car, and this would go to a large way in meeting those dreams.
Kevin, I'm sure you got this question before, but what was the actual impact that you saw, in the industry, auto industry, two-wheelers, four-wheelers, when the last pay commission increase was, it came into effect, the central government pay hikes, yes?
I don't recollect the exact figure, but I saw a ticker some time back which said that the industry growth was about 14 to 15%.
Okay.
Now, what I see happening, the benefit for the industry is with the good monsoon being forecast, you will see rural demand going up, and this will also give a burst to urban India.
Sure. Saugata Bhattacharya, who's an economist, was telling us that one can, as a rule of thumb, assume that people consume about 60% or rather spend some 60% of the extra pay that they get. Would you agree with those numbers, Kevin?
I would say that the economist overrules the finance person.
It works for you, right, Kevin?
It works for us. And the other thing which you did mention,
yes,
that it helps the FMCG and the housing.
Yeah.
I think it will also help a group company of ours like Bajaj Finance, which is in the financing sector of the consumables. So you get people upgrading, buying better stuff, and therefore willing to take the loans for these amounts. So I think the NBFC sector, which primarily finances consumer durables, will also see a big benefit of this.
Okay. This should, in a way, also help accretion to bank deposits. One would assume that your propensity to spend or save would depend on your general economic well-being, right?
That's right.
Job opportunities, prospects for pay increases, future pay increases, etc. So how would you rate that environment right now, Kevin?
I would say that there will be the element of percentage of savings will continue to be the same. So if a person is getting X amount and he tends to save about 20%, the 20% saving will be on the higher amount, but the balance, I think, will go into the spare consumption.
Sure. Kevin, thanks very much for that. Appreciate you joining in with that perspective. Thanks indeed.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good speaking with you. Madan Sabnavis is also joining us right now. Madan, good evening. Thanks very much. Prashant here. How do you look at the pay increases which have been announced now?
No, I think we should not exaggerate both the positive effects as well as negative effects. And I would agree a lot with what Saugata said, that when you're talking of 1 lakh crores, it doesn't really mean that 1 lakh crores is going to be spent by individual households. In fact, my own estimate is that around 50% should be spent. And since we're talking of around 30% coming back to the government in the form of direct taxes, rather 20% coming back as taxes, another 30% being saved. In fact, most of the pensions would tend to get saved and not really spent. And that's on the positive side. On the negative side, to say that the government's deficit will come under pressure, I think that also should not be overstated. Because already we have seen around 50,000 crores of provision have been made in the budget in terms of pay as well as the pensions. So, to my mind, there will not be any untoward pressure as such on the government's fiscal, which will be spread over a period of time. So, I don't think there's anything to worry or anything to be exalted about.
Yeah, 50,000, roughly the big numbers, 50,000 has been provided for, as Madan pointed out. Another 29,000, roughly about 30,000 crores will need to be sort of accounted for later. And then, I mean, the rest, of course, is the railway allowances, which is another 20 or 1,000 crores. So 50, 30, 20, that makes the big 1 lakh crore number that, of course, was spoken about quite a bit. Dipan Mehta is also with us. He's been waiting patiently, member BSE NSE. Dipan, thanks very much. Good evening. How do you sort of look at the impact that this may have on consumption, basically?
Good evening. Thanks for having me. No, I think by and large you are aware of this particular event, and largely it has been factored in. But yes, I think timing is important, along with onset of monsoon and global markets also rallying. This was an additional sentiment booster, and I think the stocks and benefit are clearly known to the market players. In any case, I think since Brexit, the mood of the investors is to invest more and more in domestic consumption stories, and the fact that the pay commission has been approved by the cabinet just reinforces this particular theme. And what we are observing over the past 2-3 trading sessions is that there's a gradual adjustment taking place within the portfolios of large investors and high net worth investors as well, whereby they are trying to scale down the companies which are externally focused, like say pharmaceutical or other, and going more into the domestic oriented companies, and they could be in the finance field or in automobiles or FMCG. I mean, whatever goes to the average consumer, that is being bid up higher and higher. But the sad news is that these companies anyway have been performing very well, and are many investors are overweight in it. And I would say at present, I think they are fairly to rather richly valued. So there's not much margin of safety in buying some of the consumer-oriented stocks. A lot of them have been bid up pretty high. So just add that word of caution over here as well.
Fair enough. Let's take a very quick commercial